Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the CCA PLA13. We're going to do this one a bit quickly, and I'll get into that in a minute or two, but this is what it looks like up close. So for those of you who aren't aware, the PLA13, of course, is CCA's or KZ's first planar model, and that's a 13.2 millimeter planar driver, and they wrote planar on the faceplate just in case you forgot what kind of driver was in there. So there's some kind of, I think these are more decorative vents on the side, and down in there you can almost make out the big planar driver, but it's quite hard to see. And on the top there are two vents, and again, I'm not sure those are actually real. There's probably a small vent hole behind one of them, but nice decorative look. This is the box. It comes with a nice color picture, some specs on the back, and the cable is one that you're kind of familiar with. This is the one that KZ has been using quite a bit this year, and it's this sort of 2-core flat style cable. So as we kind of jump into it, this is what the frequency graph looks like, and it's, you know, a bassy set, I guess is what you call it. Maybe it's targeted towards bass heads. It's a very fun level of bass right there. That's a lot of bass. It's a pretty steep curve. It's a lot, and it comes in at kind of a sharp angle, and it kind of bangs up into, again, quite a little steep pin of gain area here. So I would call this one almost a deep V. It's definitely a V-shaped set, and along with that you come with mids that are going to fall back quite a bit behind this, and that's exactly what it sounds like. You know, planar extension on the treble is pretty much all there as you would expect it to be. Just some, you know, I think they just kind of overdid, got a little overzealous with the levels here, This slope right here between 2 and 5 that's the right shape. It just needs to be brought down about 2 or 3 dB, and that would have given you a nice, very balanced set. But so that's the gist of what the graph looks like anyway. So let's jump right into it and move through this a bit quickly because of number one. So this is, as I said, this is KZ's first planar set, but this is not going to be the last set. The next one is actually right around the corner. So I think rather than dig into this one and go too hard on it, I think we'll just do a kind of a top level. And because the next set, I actually expected it to be out announced already, because that's usually what happens is by the time I get around to reviewing a KZ set, the next one has been announced. So I was kind of surprised that it hasn't been announced, but trust me, it is coming out very soon, right around the corner. So first, maybe a couple missteps that KZ really did on the PLA13. So they developed a driver, a planar driver that competes with the others, you know, some of the other planar models like the Timeless or the Dioko or S12. You know, this is a 13 millimeter planar driver, but they wrapped it in a tuning, that big V-shaped tuning that doesn't really showcase the capabilities of that driver. People are picking up planar drivers for that great mids, high detailed mids, great resolution, decay, separation, all these things that kind of come through in the mids and the treble, and they sort of wrap the tuning around maybe a more bass head style tuning. So I think there's just a disconnect with what they developed, all the work they put into making a great planar driver, and then delivering it in a package that doesn't really showcase what these are really good at. So generally, like I said, it's got too much sub bass, as you saw in the graph, a little too much pin of gain as well, so you get that big V, and in between the two, you kind of get the recessed mids between them. What they did, you know, that step in the right direction, I do think the PLA13 EQs very easily, and I started to EQ it kind of almost out of the box, because out of the box it sounds quite bassy and kind of distractingly amount of bass, but it does EQ easily. If that level of bass bothers you, you can definitely EQ it down very quickly. And I would suggest that owners who actually picked up PLA13 definitely EQ it to your preferences, make it your own, because what the KZ's tuning and what they were going for is something that's going to work for a set of users, but everyone else is just going to be distracted by that amount of bass. So my frustration with this set is just that the driver is actually very capable when you clean it up. When you EQ it, you hear all the planar qualities that come through, all those qualities that people are buying planars for, but they delivered it in a tuning that really required EQ to hear all those things. So it's not perfect. It's not the best planar driver, but as far as delivering a full 13, not inch, but millimeter planar driver at $64, I think they actually succeeded in doing that quite well. And as I said, I think the next one will actually clean up pretty much everything that's on this sheet, and that's yet another reason why I didn't want to go too hard on this one. So 2-minute review on what this one kind of sounds like. The bass. So the sub bass is just too much, and the quality really isn't there for the level that they used. It does drop off quickly to the mid bass, but the sub bass is just really distracting. And for those of you who may have caught Hawaii Bad Boy's video on this set, and he sort of mentioned how it sounds kind of weird, lots and lots of bass, I think that's what he was talking about. For a library that has quite a bit of bass, this one is just going to sound a little bit distracting, a little bit weird. It just sounds a bit off. If your library doesn't hit the bass all that hard, then it sounds much more like a regular IEM, almost like a planar set. But as soon as you hear any of this bass, things go kind of crazy because it's almost super bloated. It's just really, really big, and I can't figure out why they ever picked that level, but that is definitely a fun level. But yeah, it's just to me, I think it was just a bit too distracting. And the mids, they tend to go recessed, and there's definitely moments where it sounds really good, and a lot of it just depends on how much bass is in your track, how much treble is in your track. If you have any of those things, that are sort of towering over the midsection like that, as soon as you hit these areas, this falls back quite a bit. But if your track is focused right in the middle, or you're just listening to a vocal with maybe a guitar or just like an acoustic vocal, then everything sounds, kind of all good, and it sounds like a planar, and it sounds like this is a planar set that can be in the ballpark with the other planars. But yeah, it definitely has that planar feel to it. There's some sheen to it. There's a bit of thinness to it because they really kind of bumped this area up a little bit too much, and this is just a little bit thinner than it should be. This whole thing needs to be that angle, but dropped about 2 or 3 dB, and it wouldn't be as thin in the mids. But as far as the details and the decay and the separation, those things that you're kind of expecting to come through on a planar set, it's kind of there. It's just kind of hidden up by this tuning. So the treble, like I said, that lower is just too peaky. They really raise it just a few dB too high, and it really throws off the balance for the rest of the treble. And you can kind of see this part is just a little too high. You get a big emphasis right here, and that catches even your vocals where they're sort of higher and a little thinner, and they tend to block and mask what really happens out here. And there's really nice extension happening out here, but you end up hearing the emphasis here. And if you knock this down a little bit, then the rest of this becomes all balanced, and it's actually quite nice. But as it was delivered, I think that part is just a little too peaky. So the stage, especially on this set, for me, this one is all about the source. It sounds very, very flat when it's underpowered. I think a lot of planars actually have the same exact problem, and that's why this one, it reminds me so much of other planars. Very, very similar. Lots and lots of things that remind me of other planars, and this happened to be one of them. When you hear it underpowered and how flat it is, and if you remember going back to the original Timeless reviews and how people said it was flat and had no depth, a lot of those things ended up sounding very, very similar to this one when it's underpowered. But give it a nice little amp, it definitely opens up and it widens and it deepens, but you do need quite a bit of power. So I think KZ will say it's easy to drive, but as far as an optimal playback on a planar set, whether it's CCA's, KZ's, or Dioko or S12, I think that they all enjoy quite a bit more power than what you're going to get out of your phone. So that's what I got on PLA13, and like I said, we'll be doing this again in a couple weeks with a KZ branded set. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.